Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at building a sports leaderboard, basically a way to track the ranked order of people in a sporting event. And we're going to be doing this based on some of the things that we've already covered in the last two shows revolving around Google Sheets, but also doing a deeper dive into some of the automation features in GT Title Designer. So before we get to that, uh, let's, I want to invite everybody, please, if you have any comments or have anything you want to share, please just put it in the comments field below. We'd love to also have you give us a call if you'd like to join us on the show. So please just click on the URL below. It's in the show notes, and somebody at the studio will get you on air with us. Okay, so let's get started. And probably a good place because there might be some people that are not as familiar with what a leaderboard actually is. So let me just actually demonstrate what it is we're going to be working on. So this would be a very traditional leaderboard in golf. There'd be the camera panning over the golf course, and this would come on top showing everybody ranked order for how they were doing in the tournament. So if I were to change anything in this, so I'm just going to sort of off camera here, I'm going to change the order of two of these people. So I'm going to make this person jump in rank. So now if you look, I just changed one of the uh, people in rank. So Brady Richards now moved into third, and you saw that both third, fourth, and fifth place all change dynamically. So that's what we're going to cover how to do on today's show. So probably the first place to start with this will be jumping into some of the stuff we set up for Google Sheets, because now this whole leaderboard is being driven by Google Sheets and what we have already set up. So in Google Sheets, I've laid this out where I have 9 players just to line up with the different people we have on the leaderboard. And I had things set up so that you have their total score through how many rounds, what round they're in, and then we're going through what their scores are in each of the rounds and the number of strokes. And then we also have a URL here for a picture of each one of the golfers that are in the tournament. So the way then that this is set up is anytime I change a value in one of the rounds, so say this is the current round that they're playing, and I change this, it is set up so that it will calculate what their new score is when I change this here. And we're just doing a very simple formula where we set up what is par for where they should be. It's not real golf scorekeeping, but we just wanted to do something that would be easy and dynamic enough. So whenever I change one of these scores, what you'll see is that this will automatically recalc. And if the person did have a change in position, the sheet would also sort automatically. So everything we did here is just based on standard spreadsheet model calculations where you take this, and if you look up here, it's basically taking the total of strokes and subtracting that from this value from this 240 value. So this is really it. So they can either be over or under, basically, which would be below par or above par. But that's all we're doing here. So it's a very simple calculation, and the number of strokes is just the addition of all of the scores in each of the rounds. So again, very simple spreadsheet style calculations being done here. But probably the interesting part is going to be in what we do with both the scripting that we've done with this. And as I said in the show notes, I promise this is going to be very simple scripting, but it actually opens up a lot of power. So this is something I think everybody should be able to adapt pretty in a pretty straightforward way. Uh, Before we get into the scripting, though, let me just check. We have Pavel. Pavel joined us from Moscow. Pavel, thank you very much. I appreciate you making the time to join us live here. So, okay then. So let's get into the scripting. So if you remember from previous, the last two previous shows we did, under Tools, there is something called Script Editor. And if you click on Script Editor, this is where it will actually go and open up any scripts that you have associated with that sheet. Now, because this background is so white, it's going to not have a great contrast for people viewing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio Code, which will give me the ability to basically show you the exact same things we were looking at there, but hopefully in something that's a little easier for everyone to see. So for this, we actually have two functions that we're setting up. The first one is a function that's going to sort the sheet. So anytime that we want to have, like we update the data, we want to be able to say, now let's make sure everybody's in the correct order. So this is what this spreadsheet will do. This function in the spreadsheet will do. So just going through it, the first thing you do normally when you do any scripting in Google Apps is you have to capture, for in this case, it's the spreadsheet. So you say, get the active spreadsheet. So basically, this is saying we have the spreadsheet called Leaderboard. So it's getting the active spreadsheet using the method get sheet by name and the name of the sheet. And it's assigning it to Leaderboard sheet. So this basically does that initial, let's grab the spreadsheet as an object we can start to work with. And as we did before, if for some reason we can't find the spreadsheet, it's not available, it'll just log that as an error and exit, so we don't break things in using the scripting and crash anything. So that's just an error check. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the data that contains all the scoring information. We're not really just getting the data, we're getting a reference to it. So we're coming back and saying, take and get this range of information defined by these points, which is basically what's the row and the column that we start and the row and the column that we stop. So if we just jump back over here to the spreadsheet, you can see we're starting on row 2, column 1A, and we're ending down here, which is row 10, and I feel that's 12. So this is just going to give us this section of the spreadsheet right here that we're going to be working with. And so that's how we set this up inside the script. So again, this just grabs a pointer to all of that. And we, again, just do error checking, make sure that there's some data there and that was actually able to find something. And then we do one function call to that. We basically turn around and say, take that data object that we said from the spreadsheet and sort it using column 3. So column 3, if you remember here, oops, let me move this out of the way. So column 3 is the score. So we're saying based on score, you can sort this, and we're doing ascending equals true. And that means we want to go from the lowest to the highest, which in golf is actually how the lowest score in golf is the top performer. So this gives you that range that's sorted. And when you're done, it just goes on and it's like, okay, new rank order for each of the rows. But the thing that makes this work and actually makes it really powerful is this tiny little function down here. So what this function is on edit. And this is called automatically by Google Sheets anytime somebody makes a change to a spreadsheet. So in this special function, it would get past an argument, which would basically be an object pointer to whatever data item changed. So you would be able to use that to do some decision making. So if an object changed that I didn't want to sort against, I could add logic in for that. But we don't really care in this case. It's a very lightweight operation. And so all we're doing is we're calling the function we just did up here, sort sheet. So it's really simple. You make a change, and anytime that change is made, Google Apps will automatically call sort the sheet, and that will change the rank order. So that's all we've done. So now anytime I go in and change something here that could cause a rank to change. So for instance, let's just take the man all the way at the bottom here, and we're gonna bump him up. So we'll say instead of 25, he had 20 there. So as soon as I hit enter, it will make this call, and now this will generate a. Oh, did I? Oh, he did. It wasn't enough. he didn't change his position. So if let me make this 18. So if we go and make that change, this will get called, and now you can see automatically just by changing the data. So this now gives us a really powerful way to just have somebody enter information, and based on that information being entered, things can happen downstream dynamically. So before we get on to looking at how we leverage that data inside GT Title Designer, let me just welcome James from Arkansas. James, thank you again. Always great to have you here. So appreciate you making the time. So let's jump back to vMix over here. And what we're going to do is we are going to open GT Title Designer, which is probably opened already here. Let me see. Yep. So in GT Title Designer, I actually have the overlay open that we're going to be feeding all this data into. And the way we've done this is we've structured each one of these positions in the leaderboard as its own layer inside of GT Title Designer. So we have a backdrop layer, and this backdrop layer, which is all the way on the bottom here, that has all of the elements that make up this background. So the title across the top, these little golf clubs, the position markers with the sort of blurred out background behind them. So if I just turn this on and off, you'll see all of that goes away. And so this is sort of our bottommost layer. We then have individual, what I call them, cards for each one of the positions in the leaderboard. And so these cards are going to be made up of several elements. So first, the card itself is a layer. And you'll notice that this layer isn't the full size of the screen. This layer is just clipped to the size of the card. So any actions we do, if I want to move anything in or out of this card, it will happen within that box that we set up, sort of the outer bounds of that layer. So that's something that is definitely useful for, for basically when you work with animations, for keeping things within the space you want to and not have them splashing all over the screen. So then in this card, we have a set of elements. So we start with the photo box. So that is the image that we're getting for the golfer. We have their name. We have their score, which is this down here. We have a little bar that we put in which sort of separates the score from the number of strokes. So that gives us a simple way to visually to isolate them. And then the last thing we have are the number of strokes that this golfer did. And so we do this now for each one of these golfs. So each one of these are basically a repeated stack of elements with slightly different names. So we handle this, we have a way to identify each golfer in the leaderboard here. So this is all we've set up in terms of elements, the background, and then a series of layers on top with a card that contains these same elements for each one of the golfers. So what is interesting though, and what makes the visuals compelling, is that we've added animation to this. And so in vMix, in GT Title Designer specifically, if you have the 4K or the Pro version, you have GT Title Designer, which has all of these capabilities. There is a tab here called Animations. And what you will do with this is you can go here and then select any one of these elements in here, and you can animate it based on different criteria. So let's just, in this case, we'll say, let's select the name box here. So now, if I look here, there's lots of different things that we can do for animation. So there's transitions in and out. So when I bring this on screen, this overlay on or take it off, that will, anything we ask it to do during the transitions in or out, that's what will happen. We have pages, which is something else we can cover in another show on GT Title Designer, but they're very, very powerful. The ones we're interested in, though, are all the way down here. So these are the data change in and data change out triggers for animations inside of GT Title Designer. So if you look, there are these two at the top, data change in and out, which will happen if any data anywhere in this title, whether the background images, whether it's something in any one of the cards in the leaderboard, any change, the in and the out will be triggered with that. So that's probably sort of too generalized, because we don't want to refresh everything anytime any data gets changed. But what we want to do is we want to turn around and say, when specific elements in GT Title Designer are changed, we will go and we will run a specific animation for that. So right here, we're all the way in card 1. So I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and you'll see that we now have, let's take a look, data changes for everything in, so card 1 is in something called box 1. So that's sort of where we put things. So each one of these elements. So photo box 1 is basically the element that's holding the photo. And we can say on data change in and data change out, we want you to take this specific animation with the photo. So let me just click on this so you can see. So for here, sorry. So if I change this here, sorry, I was in the wrong thing. So if we go here, you can say for data change in, I'm actually going to fly the element out. And then for data change out, I'm just going to go here. I'm going to just zoom phase, just sort of pops it back in. So this is a good point for me to actually clarify something with data change in and data change out. The names can be incredibly confusing to people. So data change out means that essentially you are leaving, the data has gotten to you and you're now finishing up. It's the out. It's like transition in and transition out. So data change in is when the data is basically sort of arriving. So what do you want to do? There's new data that has come in. So how do you want to animate? And then when you're finished, the new data has gotten here and you want to finish the animation, that's your data change out. And what makes this so counterintuitive is that on the data change in, you're looking for a way to remove the element that's already there. So you're thinking, I'm flushing this one out and putting a new one in. You have to think of it the opposite way. Basically, new data has come in, so I got to do something with the old one. And then I want to present this new data, so now I'm going sort of data change out. I'm finishing that and leaving it, so how do I want to present the new data in? coming into this. So just think the opposite way of what you probably intuitively would be thinking of here. So what we've done then is we do this where we can set this up, and then when we have this set, so we can just go over here and say play in and out, and this will let us see that it flies off the side and then the new one comes in. And we've done this for each one of these elements. So if we come over here and go for name, I can go down here and look at name, box one, in and out. So you can see we're just doing fades. So we do fades for both in and out. Now, this is something, because if you haven't used this, there are a lot of little gotchas in here that could definitely throw you off track. So I want to call out a few things. You need to select the item that you're working with primarily. So right now, I'm working for when data changes inside of name. I can, when this data changes inside of name, change anything else too. So I could turn around and say, when the name changes, I want you to do something else around the picture. So I want to flash the picture as well as if the name changes. You could do things where it's triggered by the name change. But if you come up here and you start to say, well, this is what I want to do for data for the name, and this is what I want to do for data for the photo, and this is what I want to do. It doesn't work that way. You select the item where the data is changing, and you say what animations to what elements you then want to have take place when that specific data item changes. So you can end up, basically confusing things and creating lots of things you don't want to see by accident. So make sure you select the element that's the data will change on, and then select the animation you want associated to that element changing. The other thing which can be really helpful is you can actually just get a list of all the animations you set up. So when you're sitting here trying to figure out, why isn't something working or why is something else happening when I click or data changes here, this little view all animations will be your friend. So you can just scroll through all of this, and this is basically telling you everything you have set up already. And these are all the things that we've set up for this title template here. And there are lots of little elements, but a lot of them are sort of the same thing repeated for each one of these. And from here, you'll have a very good idea of everything that you're doing as you set all this up. So with this all set up, all we did is we took this and we moved everything, copied everything and pasted it as different layers and set this up and positioned them all. And one of the things I just want to call out, because I mentioned it at the beginning, let me go to the photo box here. If I play the in and out here, on my standard card, photo box, and let me say, excuse me, I want to make sure I cover this because I think it's important. So if I play the data in or out here, you see this slides off the side, and you'll notice that it crops right here. So when this slides off, if I hadn't taken and put the boundaries of this layer tightly around this card, this would have slid all the way off to the side of the screen. And that really isn't the look we want. So this boundary here is something you can edit. And you want to make sure that when you do this, you have it as the constraining area for the animations that are going to take place. That's just something else to keep in mind as you do this. But this is all we had to do to set everything up here. So let's go into vMix, because this is the other piece that's a little different. But before we do this, let me just see. We have a few more people join us. So Josh, GT Title Designer looks like MS Paint on steroids. So yeah, I mean, GT Title Designer is actually really powerful, but it complements a paint program. So you really can just deal with primitive objects inside GT Title Designer. So you can load an image from something else, or you can create fixed shapes, circles, squares, other things that you could use. So you could do some nice lower thirds and other things. But if you wanted to do stuff like you couldn't create the golf clubs that we had in the corner, crossing over for the image. That's just things we loaded in, and we did all those in Photoshop. But yeah, it is incredibly powerful for combining elements and then animating them and setting up the framework for populating them with data. So we have Ovidio. So hopefully Ovidio, I said your name right. So from Bucharest, thank you. This is great to have you joining us for the show here. So we appreciate you being live with us here. And we have David Hurley. David, thank you for joining again. Really appreciate it. Okay, so let's jump back in. And the last thing I want to cover here is how do we actually, when we set this up, how do we actually map the data? So if you remember, traditionally we go to Data Sources Manager, and we have all the data that's coming in. And anytime changes happen, this data will be updated every 5 seconds. So that part hasn't changed. What you'll notice is that unlike when we were doing like lower thirds or panel members, other things like that, we actually we had to keep changing what was being mapped to a single image because we were basically using a template to say, these are my different lower third guests, and we're just saying, take whichever row is selected in here and populate the title with that. For something like a leaderboard, this is going to be different. So if I go back to the leaderboard here and go title editor, what we actually want to do is we want to map each of those rows one-to-one with elements in the title, because all of those elements will be showing up all the time. The only thing that we're changing here that makes this different is we're changing the order of these elements, and that's what we're doing when we sort the sheet. So for right now, we have everything from box 9, which is the 9th position. So if I sort of see over here, this will be right down here. This is the 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th. So everything here lines up this way. So box 9 are all the elements that are in here. And in data sources, we go and we pick what source is the leaderboard. And the sheet is leaderboard. There's only one sheet here. And these are all the columns that we have available. So we can go in here now and pick any one of these columns. So in this case, this is just, I believe we had player name. And we're doing this specifically now for row 9. And this is letting us now map things by row. And as we change the rows, the leaderboard dynamically adjusts for this. And so this is really powerful because these types of things where you need to have people in some sort of ranked order, you map them one-to-one with elements and then change the order of those elements in a spreadsheet or other type of table you have, and that automatically updates your leaderboard for that. The other thing, which actually came up in a question that somebody asked on our YouTube chat after the show, was how do you map images inside, how do images map with elements that you have inside GT Title Designer? How do they scale? So one of the things, if you look at, if we just pull this up as an output over here, if you look at the top title, or Aaron Johansson, his card is a little bit bigger than all the cards, but the images that we're mapping don't change. So all this is doing is it will scale any image that's mapped into GT Title Designer to fit without changing aspect ratio for the largest, whether it's width or height. So if this was shorter, it would keep the aspect ratio, but make the width sort of the full size, and you would just have blank space top and bottom, or inversely, but it will scale. So this doesn't have to be one-to-one. These images, in fact, are all much bigger than the elements that we're mapping them into. So that scaling will take place automatically for you. So nothing you have to worry about there at all in terms of how you set any of this up. So uh, hopefully you found this useful. I know we threw in a lot of different elements, so some of scripting, some GT title designer, some data mapping in vMix, but this is basically how you would set up a leaderboard with sort of dynamic flows inside of it. So before we wrap up today's show, I just want to get back to everybody here. So we have Fan Films from Brazil. So Fan Films, thank you for joining us. Definitely appreciate that. We have Guilherme. So hopefully I've said your name correctly. Here we have a data table that everything is picked from, and the GFX operator do the updates on the front end table. When he's ready to press a button, that update to the data table to avoid errors. So yeah, that is actually a very good point. We could do that here. So in our previous show, what we did is we selected a range of cells from one table in a spreadsheet, from one page in the spreadsheet, and pasted them to another page in the spreadsheet, another sheet inside a larger spreadsheet. So that QMA would cover basically the model that you're looking at, where somebody could make all the changes, and then when those changes moved over to the sheet that's being read from by by vMix, actually, because at this point it's outside GT title, then you'd have that chance to sort of proofread it. And in fact, if I were thinking of this as something we would do internally, what I would probably do is actually have the data from that sheet output out a second output in vMix from that first sheet. And then you would be able to put that up using NDI Studio Monitor on another display. So you could have somebody visually check. So not just I'm looking at the data, but maybe a name's a little too long, or something isn't lining up right. So it would give you a chance to correct and make adjustments while looking at what the final output would be. And you could do that just by loading a second GT title designer with the same overlay, and then just do different data mapping. So you map from the first sheet, and then the one that's for production gets mapped to the second sheet. So that's definitely something that you can do. And hopefully we've given everyone enough detail in this show and the two previous ones with Google app scripting that you can take this and apply it, because I think that's a very good point that Guilherme made here. So we have, let's see, who else? Sisse, thank you again for joining. Always good to see you here. David, I'm assuming that this is talking about, so David just did an interesting comment, which I'm assuming is talking about not getting the opportunity to check before you post. So David, thank you. And so a video, let's see, it's, he said, okay, what if I had to get live data from a web page and import into Sheets instead of building that table myself? Okay, so there are different ways to get to get into to get into web pages. So sometimes that data can be presented by a web page in something like RSS. Sometimes it can be released as JSON. vMix can actually handle all of these. There is no tool to just do page scraping inside of vMix, especially because it's not something then, that if you want to populate a sheet, there's no direct, easy way to do that. And the other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes if the person who's publishing that spreadsheet isn't making that data available in a consumable format, it may be something that they don't necessarily want other people pulling out of their site. So just something to keep in mind, because as content creators, I think all of us can be a little sensitive to making sure that the work and effort we put in is respected. So that's just something, keep in mind that unless you have permission, you typically, or there's some sort of license, we typically wouldn't uh, recommend pulling data from another site without some sort of agreement in place for that. So let's see. So David was talking to Guilherme. So my apologies. I just knew it wasn't something that I was able to understand. So yes, apologies for the side conversation there, but thank you for clarifying that. So we have Joy. MM, thank you. Appreciate you being here with us. Uh, and so we have Yame is mentioning that they have a program scraper. Uh, so I mean, if you're working with edge cases and you have agreement, I think there are lots of technologies out there for pulling data and ingesting into spreadsheets, into vMix, into different types of XML or JSON formatted streams. So that's fine. And the point I was making was really just about having that licensing relationship, because those things can be dicey, and you certainly wouldn't want to be pulling something that ended up getting you a ding on one of the social media platforms. So all right. So I think what I'd like to do is we'll wrap up the main show. We will stick around for questions and to forward this discussion a bit in the post show. So we'd love to have you with us. If you can't stay, we will see you all next week on our next Streaming Alchemy show. Otherwise, we'll be back in a moment with the post show. Take care. All right. Welcome to the post show. So, this was something that actually was inspired by, we had somebody asking us about doing something for horse racing. And what was different from what they were asking is they were looking for some way to work with scripting for a crawl. So something that would go across the bottom of the screen, sort of here, and just sort of move across. And that has more limitations for what you can do and how you can move objects. So we weren't able to spend a huge amount of time figuring that out yet, but it sort of inspired the leaderboard construct, because that was effectively, they have a scrolling leaderboard that they were using here. So that sort of got us thinking about how this would work. And we put this together based on that. And we thought it was a good segue off of what we had been doing with Google Sheets and the Google Apps scripting, specifically because it covered doing updates, doing functionality based on changing data. And we thought that was really cool, because this way somebody could just edit a sheet, and when that data changes, that certain actions can happen. Now, the downside to this is that if I wanted to change multiple data elements on a line, let's see if I can switch over to the sheet over here. So if I turn around and say, okay, I've got this sheet. If I change, and we're gonna, let's see, we'll bump this guy down. So say I needed to change scores for this day and for the previous round because there was an error. So if I come here and say, okay, this is 26 here. Now, as soon as I enter the data, what will happen is this will move. So if I were going over here and I had just changed this column, the element in this column here to 26, and I was going over here to change the next one, I'd have to be aware that this actually moved down. So there is a downside in terms of tracking things, because things are moving around here. So if I were doing this, there might be things where I would highlight the row that just got moved, so I could know if I was changing it that that's the row I was in, and then after some period of time, remove that highlight. So I'd probably do a little more to this if I were using this in production, but that's just something, if you're going to pull off some of this to use in your own, just be aware that if you're going to change multiple elements in a single row at any given time, that row is going to move potentially when you change that first one. So just make sure when you're changing the second one, you're doing it on the correct row there. So, uh, so let's see. Josh is asking. Uh, so actually, no. Let's go back. So, a video was saying thanks for the remarks. So in most cases, yeah, everything that's typically, so it can be different in different countries, but typically when governments publish data, that data is public domain. It's sort of the government represents the people, and so the people really own that as an asset. So that's typically the case. That may not be the case uniformly, so I'm not giving legal advice. But as Avidu points this out, in most cases for public authorities, things like election results would normally be, publicly available. And I agree. If that's something you're changing, that will be changing, throughout the course of a night when you're covering an election, it would be great to be able to pull that out right off every website. And again, there could be ways to do that. Websites are actually just structured information. So if you know how to read that and can point to where in the structure of that information is the data you want, you should be able to pull that out and use that to populate a spreadsheet. So very good point. I thank you for clarifying that. So let's see. So Josh says, did you all change the camera? Seems like a shower of depth of field that I remember. So actually not. This camera right in front is it's a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, and we have a 25 millimeter f1.4 lens on it. So this is basically what we've been working with here. So we weren't really going for a shallower depth of field, but it's possible if something was moved a little bit that we could have a bit of a change, but nothing on the camera side. But thanks for calling out, because I mean the depth of field is always something. It you want when you're doing something like we do here, where it's more of an interactive show and not cinema, that it's enough to create sort of a focal plane, someplace where your eye is drawn, but not so much that it becomes arty. So we're not really trying to make everything blur in the background. But this may be, it could just be a little bit of a positioning difference. But uh, that's sort of what we're going for in the shot that you have here. We have another camera over here on the side, which doesn't. It's a PTZ, so it's not perfectly color matched or anything. But this doesn't have any real depth of field at all. So it's a very it has a very deep depth of field. So you don't really get any blurring at all for this, and that's good because the monitor we have in the background is pretty far back. So we want to make sure that doesn't get too out of focus when we cover it from this shot. But so this is really the two main shots we're using. And yeah, this camera, we definitely like the image from it for this main shot. And a little bit of blur in the background we think is good visually. All right, so let's see. So, well, Josh just said it looks great, so we're glad it works. We're always looking for ways to improve. So we never take feedback in the wrong way, even when it's critical. Where we like to ingest that and process it to see what we can be doing better. So we have IT Chill. So just mentioned. Wow, that cool technique. Thank you so much. So, IT, and there are people here, they see that you're a Linux person from the Ubuntu image. So there will be definitely people here that will be cheering for you. We have a definitely a vocal Linux contingent here, but unfortunately there's still some stuff that just doesn't do as well under Linux as Windows right now. But I keep getting told how wrong I am on using Windows for as much as I do. So great to have you join us on the show here. So and Josh mentioned, yeah, that the PTC is very deep compared, and it is. I mean, it's really the sensor size. The camera in front is a 4/3 sensor, and this is really like a 1/3-inch sensor, so it's tiny sensor size. It is a Sony sensor in this, so you do get a nice image, and it has nice colors. coming in, but you don't get a lot of shallow depth of field capabilities in this unless you move the camera really uh, either very, very close or do things, where the background's a lot further away. You could do things that way. So, you can make different cameras work with depth of field, but it's all about positioning and lighting, to get those two things set up. So, I know I've been going on about a lot of different stuff here. So if there are any questions about anything we covered or anything else, even in the periphery of things we're talking here, uh, please, get them in and we'll talk about them here. But hopefully, uh, are you going to share the Google Sheet document? Yes. So we actually have, and I'll post it because I see Josh, you're coming in through YouTube. So we post this up in a uh, in a share that we have. So this basically will let everybody download all the scripts and anything we do show by show. So we'll post that link over as a comment on YouTube to make sure you have that. But it's just a GitHub repository that we have for this, so that should make it available to everybody. So let's see. So Guillermo, he said, I don't know if I missed, but did you ever show how you set up Visual Studio to help with the vMix scripting? Okay, so what we're using here is, so let me pop this up over here. So we're using Visual Studio Code here, and that is available free from Microsoft. So this is available to everybody. There's not really a lot of setup. It opens up as a sort of a code editor. And the nice thing is based on the type of file. So if you save something as a file type, so in this case, because Google Script is very close to JavaScript, we save this as a JavaScript file, and it will then highlight everything. So it sort of knows keywords, it knows variables, it knows methods. And so you get these things that are all highlighted with different colors, which makes it much easier to visually see things. And it also lets you do things so like I can tell when I click on something, it sort of matches brackets or curly cues or whatever you're doing. So you also get a sense now of, is everything lining up the way I think when you're writing code. What you have to do from here, though, is basically cut and paste. So when we use this to do vMix scripting, you actually will go in here, and then inside of vMix, you'll just paste this in as a script. So if I switch over to vMix and we go over to settings over here, down in scripting, you can create a new script, and then so just let's see, we'll just add a script. So this will be the name of the script, and this will be where I type in the code. So what we will normally do is take whatever we processed over in Visual Studio Code and just paste it in here, save the script name, and then if we want this to be a local or a global script, we would check the box accordingly. And that's really how we use it. So there's not a lot of setup or anything custom. You just, when you save a file, save it. So for vMix scripting, it's Visual Basic. So that's sort of the scripting format that's being used there, and it's actually using Visual Basic library. So it is pretty deeply as Visual Basic. And then for Google Script, it's using JavaScript really as a template. Though, if you save them and load them, they'd have to be, I believe, .gs files. But I could be wrong there. But we just edit right inside of the Google Sheets directly in the browser. So let's see. So yes, it is Visual Studio Code. So this is just an editor. So there's no real linkage between the two. It's just an editor with good structured visuals that help you when you're writing code. And it does have some autocompletes and things, but typically just for things you've typed before. It's not trying to be smart. It doesn't give you the full dictionary. So it's not, oh, I typed this, these are all the methods that start with that letter that could apply. So it's not that you get in Visual Studio. In Visual Studio Code, it's more just trying to be helpful, but it's not incredibly smart with everything it does behind it. But it is free, and I think it does an awful lot for anybody that's writing code that wants to use it, for scripting. I think it's great for that. All right then. So I think we've come to the end of another show here. Thank you everybody for hanging around and spending the Friday, whether this is afternoon or evening with us. We definitely appreciate that. And we will see you all on our show next week. So everyone, have a good, safe week. Take care.